So, what is all the rage about breathwork and what are the benefits of it? Hello, my name is Trevor Bird, and whether you are a client of mine or you come across this video from God knows where on the interweb, I'm a breathwork facilitator, an IFS personal development coach, internal family systems, and I teach intro to IFS courses. So I get this question all the time because I talk a lot about breath work in my cohorts, and I get this question so often that it would be really nice just to have like an evergreen explanation of how I view it within the framework of IFS, why it's so powerful, what are the benefits of it, and how you can use it in your own practice, whether that's personally or using it with clients. So, starting off, what I'm about to talk about is like this is personal for me. This is why it's beneficial for me and what I've noticed in a lot of people that use it. What's true for me does not need to be true for you, does not need to be true for everyone. But if you are open to having an experience with breathwork, I believe that you will have an experience. You're going to relate to it in a certain way. We all have a relationship with our breath. So I use a very erratic style of breathing. I take inspiration from Wim Hof, conscious connected breath, holotropic breath work, and I like mash it all into my own thing because, people are really putting it forward like, oh, get trained in breath work. And it's like, really, like, if you hyperventilate for 30 seconds to 5 minutes to an hour and a half, you're going to have some adverse experiences. You're going to meet some edges. You're going to be uncomfortable. It is breath work. It's not really like breath, have a great time. So, expect it to be a bit of a workout. It's going to be hard. We meet parts of ourselves that are really resistant to doing hard things. And it can also build an incredible amount of resilience when we put ourselves into that situation in a very safe, controlled environment where we can start to play with resistance and we can play with not wanting to do something. There's a part of our brain that gets activated when we push ourselves into things. And in breath work, we're bringing ourselves to a threshold and then we are holding our breath. And so much time throughout our day, we are living in our heads. We are rationalizing. We are problem solving. We are trying to connect everything together. Have you ever gone through your day where you're having inner conflicts where a part of you wants one thing and a part of you wants another, and you're trying to figure out which one is better? And if you come into this video from IFS, you all know that we all have an access to a higher being, self-energy connection that is kind of the caretaker for all of our parts. And I believe that breathwork is the superhighway to self, to that higher being. Because your brain cannot start to rationalize, figure out, and problem solve and do breathwork at the same time. It just can't happen. So it starts to allow your parts to soften, to fall away. Now, you can even almost call this a spiritual bypass in a way because, if you do have anxiety, this can, again, my own experience, it can either bring you closer into your anxiety or it can bring you away from your anxiety because there's nothing to be anxious about because you're in the present moment because the only thing that matters is right now. And the only thing that matters is your breath, that next breath. So we can start to play with our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system as we start to breathe. And what it looks like is we take in a deep inhale in and then you just let the breath out, and you do that again and again for 30, 40, 50, however many breaths you want. And as you start to do that, it really starts to activate your system. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure starts to move. You start to feel kind of light. I even feel lightheaded right now from doing that. And we start to go from a relaxed parasympathetic system into a sympathetic nervous system, and we start to activate it. We start to bring ourselves to fight or flight. We start to, if we don't breathe, we're going to die. So we are purposefully setting off this response in our body. And then when we set it off, the adrenaline gets unleashed into our body, and there was some science things. There was some research done with Wim Hof. They had him attached to all these machines, nodes, And they discovered that when you're doing breath work, there is more adrenaline getting dumped into your bloodstream than by jumping off of a bridge. Super interesting. So you are training yourself to be with that chemical response that happens in your body, where the adrenaline gets dumped, the cortisol comes in, your blood starts to go into fight or flight, your whole system, the blood starts to leave your major organs, and it starts to just really go into like a survival response. And then we train ourselves to sit with that. We train ourselves to be with this really uncomfortable life or death situation. And we are in a very controlled environment where we know we're going to be safe. We know we're not going to die, because when we need to breathe back in, I can't take it anymore. And then you feel that relief like rush through your body, the power of oxygen hitting your bloodstream, the relief, the relaxation that comes from that. And you start to build your window of tolerance for being in stressful situations. So jumping into like an analogy or a metaphor here, it's like how we relate to our breath is how we relate to the world around us. And what I mean by that is, when you're doing breath work and you hit, 40 breaths and you're like, fuck, I'm starting to get lightheaded and I don't want to do this. Where else does that feel familiar in your life? When you're having a challenging conversation with someone, when you're doing something that is hard and you have to do it and you don't want to do it, what anxieties come up in that? And then in breath work, what anxieties come up in that? How do you start to respond to that? And this one of the most powerful breathwork experiences I had was maybe 5 years ago. I was in a holotropic breathwork session, and maybe you can kind of relate to this. I was put in a group, and they're like, "This is how you do breathwork." And my striving parts that want to do everything right and get it right, and say, "I'm gonna nail this breathwork session. I'm gonna do it better than anybody else." And so there's something within breathwork called tetany, which is when you have too much oxygen in your blood, your muscles cramp, they seize, they're unable to let go. You get like T-Rex arms, and you're like, ugh. And they talk about this is very safe. It's okay. You just regulate your breath again, and it'll release, and it'll come back to normal. And so I start doing breath work, I hyperventilate, and then I hit this tetany point where my whole body cramps up. It's so uncomfortable because your whole body is just like, you can't move it. It's kind of scary. This isn't what you're used to. It's not normal. And then I started to get really frustrated with this whole thing of like, why am I here? Why is this happening? God damn it, I hate this. And then I like screamed, because a lot of emotions, because we're not rational at that point, we drop into our body mind. We start feeling a lot of somatic experiences. And if you know about vagal nerve theory, somatic experiencing, like our nervous system holds a lot of tension, vibrations, whatever you want to call it. And so we don't have this rational vault, this part of us that keeps all that suppressed, but we get access to it. And it starts to be like, ooh, I'm here. And this is what it feels like to be really uncomfortable. And we don't have the capacity to rationalize or understand it, but we just have to be with that. So going back into my story, I'm tetanying up, I'm cramping, I hate it, I scream because I don't know what else to do. And then after I let go and the tetany, I start to slow down my breath and the comfort comes back, I started to bawl my eyes out and just fall apart and just like be like, oh my God. And within that moment, I realized that this is a lifelong pattern of mine. I push myself because I'm going to get it right. I'm going to do it well. I'm going to do it better than anyone else. And I'm going to, go to the nth degree to make this a good thing. And I don't listen to any of my regulation of, whoa, maybe this is a bit too much. Maybe it's like I push myself to the point of no return, where it gets uncomfortable, I get frustrated, I get mad at everything around me, I resent everything, I get reactive, I blow up, and then I feel a lot of shame and I collapse. And I fall into a puddle of like, this is hard. And that was all revealed to me within a breathwork session, which I was then able to integrate into my life and understand and bring a lot of awareness to when I was hitting that that moment of pushing too hard. So that was my experience. And I believe that there's also a lot there. I also have a nervous system that revs very high. So I wake up in the morning. I have things to do. I have ADHD, so I work very quickly, and there's always these parts that are like da 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 da, like always telling me things to do. And breathwork can really help me just come back down to earth, reset. So I do it first thing in the morning. Sometimes I do it before bed because it just helps my parts soften, relax, and I can just start from a regulated, normal place. And now what I said about the spiritual bypass is that, yeah, it's pleasant when you're able to build a capacity to be with your uncomfortable things, because our parts don't matter anymore. Like, we don't worry about the reactivity or the anxiety or the depression we're feeling because we're just like in this moment, and we are looking like at ourself. And it's important that we look back to our parts that are holding pain, that are hurting, to help support them as well. And so if we can bring our clients to a place of self, look at that self and be like, we're good here, and then reorient to our system, we can bring a lot more self energy online, because a lot of times in IFS sessions, we're just navigating the relaxation of the rational, analytical problem solving. Relax so that we can get access to everything there, especially those more stronger somatic experiences. So another question is like, is the resistance I'm feeling common? It's like, yeah, like I don't love doing breath work. There's parts of me that are like, God, like, it's a slog. So it's like, notice that. And it's like, when you start breathing, and going back to the analogy, when you start to meet hard things, or when you are directed to do something, what is your default mode network? What do you start to do? Do you push harder and go until you can't go anymore, like I did? Or do you collapse and say, I give up, and then just don't do it? Or do you, I don't know, there could be any number of responses to that. Get scared, get anxious. Oh my God, I have to do this and I don't want to. Like, just notice your inner world and how it relates to being in a breathwork session, I think is really powerful. And taking note of the sequence of events that happens throughout that. So I think it's a really good personal development tool. I think it's a really good way to turn our curiosity and focus back on ourselves, and just be open to whatever happens. And it's really important for us to move these emotional experiences through our bodies, because we are master avoiders. We find every which way to avoid our uncomfortable situations. We numb it, we drink it away, we drug it away, we Netflix it, we Instagram it, we scroll it, we do whatever to just not actually feel the shame and the pain that we do. And when we get into breath work, we can have a lot more capacity and access to those places and let that energy move through our body. We shake, we scream, we do anything that feels right. And even in those moments when you feel like you want to do it and you have to use your voice, and it's like, I don't want to use my voice because this feels funny and people are going to judge me. It's like, how does that feel familiar in real life? So kind of just constantly being aware of all of that. And what I love about it is, if you can go into a deep breathwork session and bring it into an IFS session shortly after, there's a lot of really great insights that can be explored there, because we have our rational and analytical mind, we have a heart mind, which we don't necessarily know or are trained to turn towards. So with all that being said, if you have any questions, comments, anything comes up for you, share it in the comments below. Reach out to me directly, _Trevor Bird on socials. Making sense of inner conflict. You can also find me anywhere there. Pretty easy to get a hold of. But thank you so much for listening. And if I didn't touch on something, let me know. I'll be sure to address it. Talk to you soon.